Welcome, swimmers and swammers. I'm today's host, Garrett McCaffrey, and joining us today is the three-time Florida LSC Coach of the Year, the six-time Florida High School Coach of the Year. He's been a member of Team USA's international staffs 4 times. He's the head coach of the Sarasota Sharks, and he just recently added one of the top swimmers in the world to his team and group. He's Brent Arckey, and this is the Swim Swam Podcast. Brent, thanks so much for making time. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So I want to talk about all sorts of stuff. I can't wait to learn from you as a fellow club coach. I know I got a lot that I could really pick your brain about, but let's start with the news, the timely stuff. Summer McIntosh coming down to Sarasota to train with you. How did that come to be?
Well, I think Sarasota is just a really nice place to live. We've got a lot of people from Canada that come down here vacation, or they winter here. During COVID, Canada had some challenges, and people were looking for some other places to train. Certainly not just Canada, but we had some people from all over the place coming down here and training. Summer came last winter for about, I want to say it was like 6 to 8 weeks, and we just had a good time. She loves working hard and kind of fit in with our group. We got a great group of teenagers down here, and we just kind of hit it off. And long story short, she was planning on kind of going back and forth, and then decided that this was where she wanted to stay. So, and of course, we're happy to have her down here. Who wouldn't be, right?
Totally. Getting arguably maybe next to Popovich, the breakout star of this summer, with some of her amazing wins in both the 400 IM and the 200 fly. She's a superstar, and adding a superstar to your team can definitely change things. What did you learn when you were at Florida in the 2008 to 2012 era with Lochte and Beisel and those superstars that you can kind of take into this experience coaching one of the best in the world?
Yeah, so I've certainly been fortunate, and I was actually there 2004 to 2010, so it wasn't quite all the way into 12, but certainly learned a lot from 8 to 10, working with those high performance athletes. Just kind of managing. You want a culture of hard work, and certainly at Florida, Coach Troy cultivates that. Coach Nesty, Coach Wilby when I was there. But you also have to manage it when you've got athletes like that. I used to always joke that aerobic practices kind of turned into, all-out wars sometimes, because there's a reason those athletes are who they are. They like to work hard, and they don't shy away from it. So I just think learning to manage and have good relationships, I think, is where it really starts with your athletes, and being able to openly communicate about what you need, where you are in the season, but then also, in my particular case, at a club level, making sure you're taking care of everybody in the group of, in my case, it's a group of 30. So I think it all starts with really good relationships. That's probably what I learned the most at Florida, and open communication. And then also I would be remiss if I didn't point out that we managed this through Emma Wyan as well over the last 5 years. And again, I really feel like we have a culture here that we're gonna try to do whatever we can for anybody, regardless of who you are, whether you're the Olympic champion or you're trying to make your first state cut. We're gonna try to find the best place for you to reach your goals, and everybody supports that. So I think it starts with culture, and relationships would be what I would say. It's sum it up that way.
For sure. I think it always comes down to that connection that you have with your swimmers and making sure that they know you care about their swimming. And, when you have somebody at that level, improvement is like even more of that 1% a day, right? It's so hard to get faster when you're already at that type of speed. And like you said, you've worked with it. You have a bunch of swimmers already who are on international teams. And they range from 50 free all the way up to these distance events. How does that group of 30 it's your national group, right? It's called the
Correct.
national group. How does it break down on a weekly basis as far as specific training groups? Are there different groups at any points of the week?
Yeah. So, well, we can get as deep into this as you want. Really our program, the top group has, I try to, well, first of all, I've got a whole bunch of really good staff that are around me. That's part of the success here. And almost all of them that are full-time coaches get some sort of exposure to the top group. They may coach an 8 and under group, but they also help me coach some of the national level kids. So I think that does two things. One, it keeps me honest. Two, it helps them appreciate what their part of the process is all the way through. I want people that are, appreciate the fact that somebody's worked with them for 10 years or 11 years. And also that gives me the ability to have multiple assistants. So the short answer is we have lots of different groups, and sometimes I'm writing anywhere from 4 to 7 different practices. But I think at a really high level, we kind of use, you asked me in the email possibly about weekly cycles. We kind of have 4 weekly cycles that we generally use. I've got one that's kind of on the experimental side right now, but the names we use are the setup phase, the base phase, the competition prep phase, and internally in the coaching staff, we use the phrase rest for the last one, rest phase for the last one. The setup phase is really one a day. We all pretty much train together, heavy drills and stroke mechanics, stroke count, a ton of kicking, and a little bit of pulling, but then also what we call base speed work. So we'll have a little progression through that phase that we'll start with 25s on a big giant interval as fast as you can go without doing with still doing things correctly, and then getting up to 75s or 100s as we progress through. And pretty much everybody's all together there, and a huge emphasis on Dryland early. And I know we'll probably get into some of that later, but early in that season, during that setup phase, Dryland, we're doing something 6 days a week. So the second one being the base phase is really most of the guys that I work with are, a lot of, we joke here that everybody's an IMer until told differently. How does that ultimately look? Most of our freshmen and sophomores, I feel, have room for improvement from an IM standpoint. So we spend a lot of time developing that IM. During that base phase, I'll have a large group that's IM focused and developing the different facets of the IM. And if I feel like down the road you're becoming more of a freestyle, especially more on the distance in freestyle, instead of being predominantly IM based, you might mix in some more freestyle as you get older. That again quickly is kind of heavy on the aerobic side and mechanics and stroke counts, efficiency, that kind of thing. And then 2 to 3 times a week, I guess if you were somebody who's really into I'm certainly not a physiologist, but I pretend to be one, I guess. I guess that red to blue type pace 2 to 3 times a week during that phase. The competition prep phase is where it really starts getting a little more specific. And like I said, sometimes I've got a group of IMers, really the 3 main groups, and then inside that there can be some subgroups, but the 3 main groups I work with are a distance group. The biggest group is usually like my middle distance, IM and stroke, and sometimes I've got some 200 freestylers in there, and then kind of a 200 down, usually a lot of breaststrokers in there, or some guys that are stretching to swim the 200. So we spend a lot of time focusing on the 200. I feel like everybody needs some of that 200 work. I think it's good for everybody. And then if they get to college and they want to be more 50 and 100, that's cool. They've got enough background to do whatever they want. So and then the rest phase, I think my assistants get all kinds of crazy with me during the rest phase, because I'll just go out there and I've got some parameters that I want to see or things that I want to see, but I'm certainly talking a lot to the athletes and adjusting on the fly. It's probably pretty frustrating for some of the assistants sometimes, but I feel like it's an important time of year for people to feel like they're getting what they need. So that's kind of that's my national group in a nutshell, and then it kind of builds throughout the entire year and through a quad. So
it's awesome. I really appreciate you being so open with that. A lot of coaches sometimes like to keep the cards close to the vest, but at the end of the day, there's nobody that's going to be able to execute your system like you. So it's not like there's a secret that they can just copy and paste. Can you let us know which one you consider the experimental phase, or if it's another one that you haven't talked about yet? Which one is experimental?
Yeah. So I don't know, I guess we're calling it like a regeneration phase. One of the things that I've kind of been working on for over the years is, I certainly have come from a work background. That was kind of my upbringing anyway. And then of course, working at Florida, the cornerstone is working hard. I went and I saw Jan Olbrecht. I wish I could tell you what year. I want to say it was 2015. And one of the things I brought back from there, at least in my opinion and interpretation, was it's okay to work really hard, but I think you got to find ways to build in the adaptation or the regeneration of whatever work you're doing. And I don't care if it's heavy aerobic work or heavy anaerobic work or whatever you want to call it. You have to rest from some of it, or you're just going to end up banging your head against the wall. So how we use that, I think, is the experimental part of it. I think everybody knows that you need to have some of that in your plan. I hope everybody knows that at this point, because I think the days of just going and just hope that it works, that's not a good plan anymore. So trying to figure out how to use that. And then I think the hardest part at the club level is, and some of these 14-year-olds, they only need a few days, right? And then by the time they're 18, they've accumulated all this work, and they can afford to rest a little longer, or maybe they need to rest a little more because now they're big, strong boys or young men. So I think that's the fun part, but trying to figure out the mix of all of those phases is kind of what we're working on. So the regenerative side, what does that week look like? Should it be before a meet? Should it be after a meet? Can you time it leading into a competition? Should it be after the competition? Should we go 8 weeks of a base cycle, or should we go 8 weeks of a competition prep cycle? Hey, maybe some guys only need 4 weeks of that. I mean, that's the fun part for me. And I just feel like the parameters that I've set for myself allow me to be a little more creative. Because if I didn't have the parameters, I'd probably just be like all over the place. So the planning is really important, and then experimenting with how all those pieces fit for each individual.
Love to dive into this regenerative idea, because all of the science says that you need one of those true aerobic days, after a couple of the intensity days. Do you mix those within a weekly cycle with all the phases?
Yes. The short answer is absolutely yes.
What does it look like? Because sometimes I have trouble just coming in and doing aerobic work and telling them not to race each other and not having like a build to fast or something that they get after it. I feel like I get antsy as a coach when they're not working something. How do you manage the true aerobic work?
I think we all run into those feelings. I think I just got an Oura ring, and I'm messing with that personally. I was messing with the Whoop band as well, and I think what we're finding is that we probably swim pretty hard on the aerobic days. At least I feel like we do. I think focusing, opening up intervals, focusing on other things other than the time, maybe putting everything on rest intervals. I've had a little bit of success doing that. And that took me a while to get okay with that. Hey, we're going to do like an hour worth of nothing on a real interval. But I think the other piece for me, it has been trusting my athletes to, let's see if I say it right. I mean, trusting my athletes to learn about themselves. So taking heart rates and starting to do some sets that maybe we come back and see every now and then, so that they start understanding that maybe the heart rate and the speed for them is an important thing to pay attention to. And then we've actually been recording some Monday morning sets based on heart rate and time that they give us through, like, we put it into a Microsoft form. And so like I kind of look at times and heart rates that they're giving me. So of course there's inherent issues with that. But I think that them being aware of it is important. So on those aerobic days, I think focusing on something other than time, other than speed, split up the boys and girls and let them do their own thing. Or maybe the freshmen all have to be with the seniors, or focus on something else, and as opposed to just how fast you're going. And I'm kind of a stroke count, and we talk a lot about stroke count. I think if you ask a bunch of my athletes, they'd probably tired of hearing me ask about their stroke count. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's something other than just the speed.
Yeah. I mean, I just have so many questions. I want to kind of understand the coach dynamic, but let's stick right there for the stroke count. Can you give an example of a good stroke count set and how you emphasize it? If it was the focus, how would you set up a set so that the stroke count's the focus?
Well, I think that we do. I don't think this is anything new. Golf sets where you take your time and take your stroke count, add it together. We're trying to descend that number. Usually we'll do something like that early in the practice, and their job is to have an idea of what that stroke count looks like. And then we'll come back to maybe a major focus of the day, and I'll ask them, hey, what was your stroke count in warm up? That's what we're trying to hold here. And of course, there's, if you're going to go a 2,000 or 3,000 yard set, there's probably going to be some degradation of stroke count. So that's my job, is to stay on top of them. But it's also their job to, if we're 30 minutes into a set, hey, what's your stroke count? If they look up at me, with a blank face, I know that they're not engaged in that part of what we're doing. So again, some give and take between the coach and the athlete. And then as they get older and a little more consistent, I think the hardest part is when you've got 14-year-old in your group, their stroke count's going to change 3 or 4 times, especially little 14-year-old boys. It's going to be drastically different by the time they're a senior in high school. So we work in parameters, like up in the top of our practices. We have, I think I got them from USA Swimming. Their general stroke counts from, I think it's either top 8 or top 16 from Olympic trials. And I put those in the top corner as parameters to stay within. That doesn't mean that you have to be exactly this number, but I think that if you want to be at that level, there's probably a range that you need to sit in. And so we kind of work off of that.
So you mentioned that on your top group, you've got, a bunch of help with coaches. How many coaches are on that group at any one time?
Depending on the time of year, it can be, it's usually 2 to 3. If I needed to, I guess I could pull somebody else in, but it's usually 2 to 3, depending on what we're doing. And it's, like I said, it's a group of 30, usually 25 to 30. So, three coaches is more than enough. Probably better than a lot of places get the opportunity to do. So, and again, there might be, this morning we had a breaststroke group, a backstroke group, a fly group, and a distance free group. So even inside of that, there were only 2 coaches. It was a smaller group this morning. So each of us have 2 groups. But I think, again, if you have a situation where you're expecting your athletes to be engaged in the process, that helps. They're almost like their own coach, right? So it's another coach on the pool deck.
these coaches probably come from some of your other groups, so they're familiar with the athletes yet?
Generally speaking, yes. So almost, all the full-time coaches at least all the full-time coaches coach two groups. Usually a senior group, just the way school breaks out for us. High school starts at 3, and then most of our age group programs start at somewhere around 5 o'clock, give or take. And so we have coaches that coach senior groups and then go to age group groups afterwards.
Just for perspective on the team and the development from bottom to top, what percent of your national group came from another group in the club? Doesn't mean they had to be there from the time they were 8, but they came from another group in the club. If you had to estimate, obviously I don't need exact numbers.
It might be a little lower right now, but it's still the vast majority. Recently we've had some move-ins just because Florida's had so much growth, but I would say 21 out of the 30, 22 out of the 30 have come through the program. Don't quote me on that, but it's probably somewhere around there.
Yeah. I think that's amazing. I think that's pretty common at the top of a lot of groups because kids come and go from the sport. A lot of times, younger groups, there's, people who go in and out. So anyway, I've seen a lot of people that jump around, even in my own experience on my own teams, and 21 coming from your team means that your age group progression is doing some things right, especially for the level of athletes that you have. Let's talk a little bit about that age group progression. And, you came all the way up the ranks. When you were at Florida, you started as an 8 and under coach. And I'm not sure exactly what your role is when you first came to Sarasota, but it wasn't the head coach and it wasn't the national team coach. So when it comes to age group, you have experience. What kind of goals, do you have to establish specific things at specific ages for your groups? Can you just give us a little bit of insight into some specific parameters for your age groups?
Yeah. So, I don't want to be too long-winded, but our program kind of went through a real flux in 14, 15, 16. And so we had some, because of coaching changes and some issues with the YMCA that we were associated with. And so we had a lot of issues with retention, a lot of issues with, just growth of the program. And so we kind of had to sit in a room and decide what direction we really wanted to go. And I feel like Andrew Eckhart and John Bruning have been really good about growing the program. And then, okay, how are we going to take these 10 and unders? One, most importantly, keep them in the sport. And then 2, what does that look like as we go through 11 and 12 and 13, 14? Now, I would be glossing over a really important fact that the previous head age group coach, Sherwood Watts, was here for 30 years, and that's a really important piece of the puzzle. I would just encourage anybody that consistency is far more important than just about anything else when it comes to age group coaches. Every time you have a coaching turnover, even in the 10 and under group, it's just a little I don't know, just a little chink in the armor, I guess, and so, and you can see it, especially when you start being in the head coaching role. When you start paying attention to things, you can kind of see it moving through the program. So I think that number one, the consistency of the coaching is really important. I think that regular coaches meetings and coaches understanding what we want long term. I would say that I think it's easy to have an age group focus and wanting to win the age group championship meet all the time, which I guess is important. And being successful is I think being successful at the age group level is more important than winning an arbitrary age group championship meet. Sometimes that happens because you've got a group of people that are being successful or that have been successful. But I think at the age group level, our goal is to try to find situations where our age groupers are going to be successful as they move through the ranks. And I don't want to take a whole lot of credit for that. Ron Aiken was somebody who I talked to, and he was talking to me about just how he believed that the getting the snowball rolling down the hill is the most important part in the age group program. So it's something I really took to heart talking to him. And then as far as like sets, we certainly have some things that I want to see. Most of them revolve around kicking and being able to exert yourself. I mean, I came from the era of, hey, in order to get to the next group, you got to go 10 100s on double O or whatever. And hey, listen, there's probably some merit in some of that stuff, but I want to see 10 100s on a bigger interval and see what you're willing to hold and do well, right? Like that probably means a little more to me than just being able to knock out, 10 100s on a minute or whatever. So we have we pare something like that down all the way to the 8-year-olds. Usually the 8-year-olds are like 25s kick all out, that kind of thing. Turn that into a game, let them, let it be fun. And then as you move through the ranks, you got 11 and 12-year-olds. I'll tell you the other thing is the progression of our program. One of the things that we've tweaked, instead of just being traditional like 11 and 12, 13, 10 under 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, we found that a lot of people are putting their kids in school a little earlier. So we've got a lot more 14-year-olds that are freshmen in high school. And what we were finding is that they were only spending a little bit of time in our pre-senior group, and felt like that was becoming a big jump to go from maybe like 8th grade right into 9th grade. 9th grade's hard enough for all those guys, right? Ninth grade's always an adjustment for everybody. So we went to paying attention a little bit more to not just age, but also what grade you're in. So you can spend a little more time at each progression level as you move through the program. So hopefully that answers it.
Yeah, I think it's good perspective and kind of gives even some exact parameters with some of those types of sets. This is where I kind of want to get into Dryland, because my question about Dryland is, when does it start in your progression and how does it evolve all the way through to your group? You kind of touched a little bit on 6 days a week during the setup phase. I kind of want to circle back to that, but I know that you keep saying, you could be long-winded. Please, Brent, be long-winded. I want to hear it. How does it start? What age group are you starting with? What are the goals down at that base level? And then what is the hope as they evolve through the program?
Well, so first and foremost, I got to give a little love to Vern Gambetta and Chris Webb with Gain Swimming. I've worked with Vern for almost 12 years now. Vern has probably been my biggest mentor, other than maybe the guys that I work with in Gainesville. And his mentorship has been something other than swimming, which I think has been really important. And Chris Webb has become he's a heck of a coach in and of himself, and he's become even better at the Dryland side. So those guys have really, really helped me, especially over the last 10, 11, 12 years. The answer is they start immediately. I mean, my son's swimming at our junior shark group, and he's doing some jumping jacks on the pool deck. And I mean, the main focus when they're young is just getting them to move athletically. I think everybody knows that we're kind of behind on that, probably as compared to the rest of the world. So just doing some crawling movements, organized play. Coach Andrew, he's got the 8-year-olds and the 10-year-olds. We have an 8 and under group and a 10 and under group. So we have an entry level group if you've never swum before, and then an 8 and under group and a 10 and under group. The 8 and unders and the 10 and unders, they have free reign to hang out on the pull-up rigs, and they've got like little monkey bars and stuff like that. And then he'll make games out of shimmying around the monkey bars or shimmying around the pull-up bars. So just learning to hang, learning to move your body. I think one of the biggest things I'm proud of is 8, 9, 10-year-olds running across the pool deck to get to Dryland because they're playing. We've got these little soft dodgeballs basically, and dodgeball turns into, hey, maybe you're only allowed to use your left leg here. You have to use your left arm to throw the ball today. So just learning to move, and I consider that part of Dryland. At the 10 and under level, it's much more games oriented, and we may teach them like a squat or something like that, just basic movements. Then at the 11 and 12 level, we do really start teaching some movements. None of them are loaded or resisted. It's learning how to brace, planks, that kind of thing. Learning how to hinge, learning how to do squats, lunge, and really strengthening the legs is a big focus there. Then the 13, 14s, they will start doing some light resisted work. Not a ton, but it's more laying the foundation and being able to do things right when you're adding resistance to it. And then at the senior level, I mean, Vern's got us at a whole different level now. We always joke that we're kind of the gain beta site. So anything where Vern gets a new idea, he's a big scholar, big reader. He's working on a book right now, so he's always got new ideas. And so that's been fun for me, is we get to try some new things as well. But I think it's all because we have a really good foundation throughout the program that we can do some different things from a dryland standpoint.
How much are they doing during race prep phase? Like, is it still 6 days a week? Is it coming down? Is it getting more? How does it change through the different phases for your top group?
Yeah, so originally we were 3 days a week. Probably about 4 years ago, we started going to 4 shorter dryland sessions every week. Most recently, we're at like 4 dryland sessions that are roughly about 30 minutes, and then some core. I mean, when I say core, we use the word athleticism. So there's a lot of core stuff involved in the athleticism, but there's also some athleticism and mobility stuff that either they're given to do on their own, or I have structured time in practice that they need to do specific mobility stuff. Like I've got breaststrokers that are doing certain things, or maybe somebody's got tight upper back and we're going to do more thoracic work. Hey, maybe we got some tight hips, we need to do something else. So we're working on ankle flexibility. It's so right now we've got a couple of times a week where we're doing that after practice, but the meat of what we're doing is about 4 times a week for about half an hour with some warm up to swim before every practice. So that's the other piece that I think is kind of the cornerstone to our dryland, is nobody's getting in the water cold. And I think the more exposed I've been to international level swimming, they're really, really good about taking care of themselves outside the pool. And I still think that we can get better at it, not only at the Sharks, but everywhere. I think getting in the pool cold, it should never happen for anybody.
Good insight. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, it seems like Gain has got its hand in a lot of the great clubs across the country. You talked about learning from Ron as far as the age group progression and getting that snowball rolling down the hill. I kind of learned in some of my research about you that as an 11, 12-year-old, you were in the top group and on your club team. And I'm just curious how you would move yourself up through this type of program. Like, would you be in the top group as a 12-year-old if you were a Sarasota Shark?
Certainly not. Without question, I wouldn't be. But I would say that it wouldn't be without some sort of segue. If I had a national level 12, 13, 14-year-old. So again, as a reminder, we've got our 8th graders, 7th and 8th graders split out, generally speaking. Sometimes we'll take an 8th grader depending on who they are and if they can get to practice. We have almost every step of the way, whether you're going from our white group to our black group to our gold group to our senior prep group, there's always some sort of segue. Most of the time it ends up being like Saturday mornings where you're invited to come to the next group. That way you're always exposed to the next group. If I have athletes that need to be exposed to the national level, I certainly will find a way to get them, whether that be coming to morning practice, coming to a Saturday practice. I try to work within their schedules if needed, because I do believe that if you have really high performing age groupers, they can get bored, and you need to be aware of that. But I think there's also a lot of merit in remembering that part of our job is to make sure that their emotional age, their maturity, and their physical age are all being developed, and most of the time they're never at the same place. So I have some real feelings on 12-year-olds hanging out with 18-year-olds. And I think part of my job is still managing, is certainly developing people and trying to manage that a little bit too. So the answer is I would have not have been currently in my national group, but that's not to say that I wouldn't make a effort if we felt like it was appropriate.
I want to give credit to my source, because I was, like I said, I was kind of doing a little research, and you did a great interview for Coach's Corner, Fitter, Faster Tour. And you talked, these are your words. You said you were a great 12 and under swimmer, a good high school swimmer, and a mediocre college swimmer.
Yeah, that's about right.
What would you say led to that? I mean, that kind of progression that kind of went the wrong way in some ways. Can you get specific on your situation and your swimming? What do you think happened during high school and college that made you less successful than as an age grouper?
I mean, certainly I made some poor choices along the way, so that's got to be part of it. I own a lot of the late high school and college just to bad decisions on my part, not anybody else's fault. I did go through some coaching changes, and that's kind of, I think, has certainly affected my my feelings on consistency in coaching. I always liked to train, and I liked being at swim practice. It was never anything like that. Would I have done maybe a little less at 12? Yeah, probably. But I think that I was probably one of those where physically, which is a little bit physically I was mature. I probably looked more mature than I really was inside, and probably wasn't ready for some of the things that were thrown at me. So again, I think that has shaped my opinion on relationships with athletes, and kind of trying to do what's best for the whole athlete, because if the whole athlete isn't really good, they're never going to be high performance.
Would you say it's a confidence thing? It kind of shook your confidence?
That's a good question. I think as an age group, I was probably overly confident. I probably thought I was better than I really was. And I think, again, that's one of the things in our sport that I try to talk about here is, you go to college recruiter's never going to ask you what your 12-year-old ranking was, right? Doesn't mean it's not important. And I think I go back to what Ron told me, right, is I would rather see somebody continue to be successful and have momentum. Careers are athletics always about momentum, right? And so if you've got momentum and you feel yourself getting better, and the work is working, and you're moving in the right direction, I think that coaches need to be really aware of that first plateau and coach kids through that first plateau, because especially as teenagers, there's a lot of distractions. You hit that first plateau, and you start questioning, is this all worth it? Is this really what I want to do? And if you don't have somebody there kind of whispering in your ear, like, hey, push through it, this is worth it. Sometimes you don't ever see the other side of what can be.
So as it went, it's kind of interesting that you ended up as a coach. At what point in that whole process did you realize that coaching was something that you were interested in?
So, I was kind of messing around in Gainesville. I went to the University of Alabama and then left and went back to the University of Florida. Went to University of Florida, and I tell people this. I was working at Publix, and I was stocking groceries and going to school, that kind of thing. And I remember the manager going, and my dad's been a very successful businessman for Procter & Gamble over the years, and and Publix was his account. And so they found out that my dad was involved in all of that. And one of the managers was like, hey, we can get you in management, manager training, and we can get you moving through this progression at Publix. And I remember leaving going, oh man, I'm going to work at Publix for the rest of my life. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It just wasn't what I realized it wasn't what I wanted to do. and I found myself getting back into the master's pool swimming. Then they needed a master's coach. I started coaching masters. They needed an age group coach, so I started coaching age group. Um, we had coaches changed. I was like, I think I might have been listed as like the interim head coach at Gator Swim Club for about 20 minutes or something, and so I got kind of a feel for that. And then I became the senior assistant, and I was really coaching. And I always remember this one as like me. I think kind of a turning point where I really fell in love with it was we were going to a set from the blocks, and had this young lady who hadn't been a best time in like 2 years in her 200 fly, and we're doing a pretty hard set. And at the end of the set, there was a dive 200, and she won her best time in a 200 fly, and like just broke down into tears. Was so happy, and I kind of remember that one as, all right, this is cool. Like if you can get people to find a way to be happy through hard work and working through things, like this is something I could get into. And then, man, the ball just started rolling. I think a lot of it had just kind of the right place at the right time, but also working hard and taking advantage of opportunities. I was coaching 8-year-olds and working with Olympic medalists at the same time. You can't get any better than that. So I think it was a natural progression. And then I got to Sarasota and learned about running a bigger team and kind of climbed the ladder here. And again, right place, right time, but also jumping on opportunities. So it's kind of just happened. But I think that time when about 2005, when I was, I watched somebody do something special for her. I was like, all right, I'm in. And that was kind of just kept going.
For sure, it gets you. I mean, you don't necessarily expect it. I did the same thing. I stepped on deck, and that fulfillment is like nothing else that I felt in any other job that I did, including this journalism thing. So I feel you 100%. I want to know what makes you great at it, because you are. I mean, I know that it's hard to kind of brag about yourself. So let's try to do it from a swimmer's perspective. If your swimmers today had to describe your coaching style, how would they describe it? And what is the thing that really makes it great?
My hope is that they know that I'm going to challenge them. They know that I'm going to be fair with them. They know that I'm going to be honest with them. But they also know, I think probably the thing that I'm most proud of is I want kids to be kids. So we talk a lot about, you're going to work hard, you're going to be respectful. Everything else I'll just kind of deal with. It's just teenager stuff. So like, I'm not worried about the strange teenager conversation in the gutter. And I want them to joke around. I want them to have fun, but I also want them to know that when it's time to go, it's time to go. So I would hope that they would say, he's tough, but he allows us to be us.
It's about creating that safe environment where they can be comfortable while they're pursuing excellence, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Would you ever consider college coaching? I think that sometimes the thought from inside the sport and outside the sport is like, oh, that's the top level. I think we both know that there are coaches at the club level that are some of the best in the world, and that doesn't necessarily mean the same thing that some status quo might expect. But does college coaching appeal to you at all?
I've done it. I would never say no, but I mean, at this point, what more could I want? It's I work with high level athletes. We've got a little community here at the Sarasota Sharks that's second to none, in my opinion. Sarasota is a beautiful place. I just try to keep things in perspective. If you're always looking for something else, you can never be happy where you're at. And I'm very happy where I am. And again, I would never say never, but there's probably a price or an opportunity that would be out there, but that's it's certainly not something I'm searching for.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. So we've talked about your swimmers' progressions. We've talked about your progression. The last little area that I kind of want to talk is about, your coaches' progressions. And you've progressed yourself and you've seen things that work and you were exposed to some of the best. You kind of alluded to a couple things. I want to start with coaches' meetings. I mean, it's great in theory, but getting everybody together for a meeting sometimes really is a drag, right? And sometimes you have coaches who have other jobs and things like that. It becomes hard to find a time where you can all meet. But if you do, I think that there's good things that can happen there as long as there's focus points and there's really stuff to go over. It's not just a meeting for meeting's sake. How do you approach coaches' meetings? When do you do them? Any insight would be much appreciated.
I mean, we kind of have a rule. We never go to a meeting that doesn't have an agenda. That goes for, a coach that wants to have a meeting, a head coach that wants to have a meeting, a parent that wants to have a meeting, an athlete that wants to have a meeting. One of the things is, you don't get to write hey, can you meet? There better be a reason why we're meeting, because the reply is going to be, sure, I'm happy to meet. What's on the agenda? So I think that's first and foremost. Don't take meetings that don't have agendas. That's just a waste of everybody's time. The second is, I think it goes back to what we were talking about with athletes. At least for me, you got to have good relationships with your coaches. They got to know that you care about them. I try to tell my coaches all the time that I will be the first person to help you find a new job if that's what a better job if that's what you want to do. But I'm going to make it really hard for you to leave. So I always try to take care of my coaches. Most of my coaches get paid very well. They would have to go be head coaches somewhere else to get a better gig. I try to take a lot of the real heavy lifting stuff off of most of them, especially if they're a part-time coach. I want them to be juiced when they come on the pool deck. So I think that's part of my job and part of my full-time coaches' job are to make sure that those little kid coaches or the ones that are part-time, all they have to do is walk on this pool deck and be juiced. Because the full-time guys, you're going to have good days and bad days, ups and downs. And I would like those part-time guys to be able to get us through the valleys sometimes. I think that I really enjoy the season planning and the weekly planning. Again, I think I said it earlier, is I would be like probably an ADD mess, like all over the place if I didn't have parameters on myself. So I think that the planning and explaining your plan to everybody else and giving them an opportunity to ask questions on why you're doing it just helps buy-in. So my meetings are traditionally, hey, this is the plan for the week. This is any new business. Hey, we've got scheduling, or hey, somebody's got meets this weekend and we need coverage. And then you get 10 minutes for anybody to air any issues that could be out there. And most of our meetings are 30 to 40 minutes long. I try not to have big old long meetings. And in COVID, we learned that we can do this. So if people want to be at home or they need to be at home, or guys like you and I that have young kids, and yesterday I had to run out of here, go get my son from the bus stop, and I was a little bit late, and everybody just taking care of each other, having a culture of family first, but when we're on the deck, we're working hard. I think that being flexible with Zoom meetings and all of that is important.
I think you've already kind of answered this, but I think it's an important point, even if we're re-emphasizing it. You have coaches that come up and help you with the top group. How important is it that your coaches all get exposure to your coaching on deck, the same way that you got exposure to people like Troy and Nesty when you were an age group coach?
I think it's an interesting question. I did a lot for free, right? I would have gotten up at 3:30 in the morning to go watch Lochte train. And so while I think that there should be some of that, you better be so passionate about being great that, hey, you want to come watch my 5 o'clock practice. But as I've gotten older, I recognize that you probably need to pay people more for their time. Not everybody's just going to want to volunteer and walk on the pool deck. So I don't know if I have a great answer for this one. Do all of my coaches get exposure to my top group? No, unfortunately. just because, maybe they've got a second job and they don't start till 5 o'clock, and my group's done at 5:30, somewhere in there, depending on the time of year. The summer tends to be a place where, because we can move our schedule a little bit in the summer, sometimes there's a little more flexibility because we have a lot of teachers that are also coaches. So sometimes that gives them more opportunities. But we've got everything in Microsoft Teams, and there's really no secrets. So like all my season plans and everything are in there, and just about anybody could get to them if they wanted to. And I have office hours. I mean, I'm here most of the time during the day. So if anybody wanted to talk swimming, I try to be available to talk swimming. In fact, that's my favorite thing to do. So
For sure. And talking swimming with a good coach is the best. So that's why I really appreciate you being here today. This is the last coaching question. When you're hiring somebody, or when you've hired somebody and you're trying to figure out if they're the right fit, what do you look for? And this is just kind of a general way to basically ask what makes a good swim coach.
Again, I'm not sure I've got a great answer on this one. I've been pretty lucky. I've got a couple of guys that have been here long term from a coaching standpoint, and I've got a third who's been here before me. And so I would like to think that in the interview process, I think I tell people that the question, "Why do you want to be here?" is really powerful, and then just listen to the answer. I think you can learn a lot about somebody when you're interviewing them. And then if they're doing a good job, you have to make sure you tell them that they're doing a good job. I'm certainly not the best at this. I start going, and I forget. And I forget that you got to pat people on the back. If you're the guy in charge, whether that's a $20 gift card every now and then, or a bonus, or whatever it is, I think that helps in retaining them. But I think interviewing, trying to find good questions to ask, and then I think just spending time doing your research. If this person's coached before, you got to spend some time digging. What's their coaching look like? Maybe it doesn't look anything like mine, and that's what we want. I think that's the other piece, is internally looking inside. What do you want? Do you want somebody that's a carbon copy of me or one of my other staff members, or do you want somebody who's going to bring some fresh ideas? Somewhere in the middle. Right now, I'm getting old enough that we're starting to have some athletes that swam for us come back. That's been a new dynamic that I'm working through. Some of them go to really good colleges and come back with really great ideas that can really augment what we're doing. So I don't know, that's kind of a roundabout answer, but we've been fortunate so far.
No, you touched on a lot of really good things, including specifics. What you said about patting people on the back kind of segues into my final little area that we're going to talk about: mental health. You talked exactly about how you take care of it with your coaches and how you support each other if you've got to run and you got family obligations and stuff. Is there any particular way that you've been addressing this very timely issue since COVID, basically, and maybe before that, I don't know, with your swimmers? How do you guys address mental health with swimmers?
Well, this may be wrong, and I'm gonna put myself out here, but my stance has been that I don't like that mental health has been taken away from health as a whole. I look at it as health is health, and if you have a hurt shoulder, you have to address that just as much as if you want to swim fast and you have a hurt shoulder, you've got to address the shoulder. If you've got mental health issues, it's health. You need to address it. I try to. How's your health? Health is health is health, and I think that there's some good and bad about separating it. But I feel very strongly that if what's between your ears isn't where it needs to be, it's just like having a bad shoulder or a bad knee or whatever it is. You've got to address it. We try to be honest about it. I sent out a survey last week, and one of the questions, and I do a mid-season check-in survey, and one of them is about your health. And if somebody comes back generally, if someone's really low and I haven't heard about it, like I will go out of my way to make sure that I ask them what's going on. Most of the time, if I get somebody who scores themselves low, I've already heard about it. I've already had some sort of communication about it, which I am very proud of. I think that they should have the ability and the desire to communicate, because as you know, right, it's a hard act to balance between being tough and pushing, but at the same time, they still have to be able to want to come talk to you if they need to. So I think that's my stance, is that mental health is health, and it shouldn't be treated or shouldn't have a bad stigma to it. It's just health. So
I love that. I think it's very accurate, and to treat it the same way as a hurt shoulder is just such good perspective for coaches. I mean, you're not going to be able to operate at the same level in practice if you have a hurt shoulder, and you're not going to be able to do that if your mind is not right. When it comes to your own mental health, and I guess this is also the second part, it's sometimes tough to recognize injury in that way, or that your mental health or your health in your head is not in the right place. I know you can't really speak for anyone else, so let's just talk about yours. When yours is in a place where you're tired or beat down or frustrated with something, what do you do to help yourself? What does it look like? And I think this is important for coaches. I think it's important for us coaches to kind of talk about this stuff, to give ideas to each other, because it is a tough job. There's a lot of sacrifice that happens with it. It's a lot of hours, and giving yourself emotionally to others is exhausting. So when it comes to taking care of yourself, what kind of things do you do to make sure that that's a priority?
Well, start with, I'm deep in the learning process of this. I'm probably not the best at it. Certainly something that I've had to think about, especially as kids. I mean, when you start having kids, you start looking at things very differently. I think probably the number one thing is being able to be honest with myself. Hey, if I'm being grumpy, or I've got stuff going on, I got to be able to take a deep breath and take a step back. And I think in years past, that was really hard for me to do, because I didn't either have the staff in place or the structure in place that I felt like that could happen. Because I think a lot of head coaches end up feeling like they've got to do everything all the time. So I spent probably the last 4 years really learning how to delegate, and then putting people in positions that they're good at and want to be in, and that can help the overall organization even when I'm gone. And that's also been a big thing, is this place needs to function even if I'm traveling or I'm not here. So that's kind of been a long-term mission. And then internally, like, I think the Aura Ring and the Whoop Band have been real interesting. Whether it be life choices or not going to bed or whatever, just seeing how that affects some of the heart rate variability stuff or my sleep. That's been, as I get older, that's certainly something that I had to pay attention to. And then just working out, I certainly feel that if you're not feeling good, the best thing to do is go hurt yourself for about 30 minutes, and usually feel pretty good afterwards. So
that's the truth. That's definitely a good piece of advice. I think hopefully all coaches understand, working in, swimming. So yeah, I think that's it. And cool. I really appreciate this 60 minutes of picking your brain, because I've learned a lot. I've got some notes that I'm taking into my own coaching, and I hope that the listeners will be enjoying it the same way I did. But Brent, I really appreciate your time, and it was awesome to get a sneak peek into kind of Sarasota and understanding what's been so successful and why it's going to continue to be so successful. So best of luck this season, and I just can't thank you enough for your time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
You've been listening to the Swim Swam podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take Swim Swam podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.